So if you recently bought the Sony a6400, I'm sure you probably have already heard Sony menu systems aren't necessarily the easiest to learn right off the rip. Well, in this video, we're going to be diving deep, going through every last menu setting and how I have my a6400 set up for video. We're going to be jumping into it right now. Hey, what's up, entrepreneurs? It's Diana here with Entre Woman TV, helping you simplify the video creation process. So whether that's diving deep into a tech video like we'll be doing today, or a video marketing tip to help you marry your business marketing with your video content strategy, both are here on the channel, so definitely consider subscribing. So today we're going to be looking into the Sony a6400's menu setting. We're going to be diving deep, so I don't even want to waste any time. Let's get to it. So you do at least want to make sure that you have your battery in your camera and you want to make sure it's on. And the dial setting that you need to be on is the movie mode. It kind of looks like an old film reel a little bit, but that's what we're going to be doing. From there, let's get into the menu. One of the things I want to first point out to you is that when you're looking at your menu on your camera, it isn't as complex as everybody makes it out to seem. Like Sony's this big boogeyman in the basement that nobody wants to deal with, but you got to go do your laundry. So one of the things we should understand before we're getting into the menu system is if you're coming from Canon, like if you own the Canon M50, you upgrade it to one of the Sony cameras. These older menu systems, or these are actually one of their newer ones, minus what comes out with the A7S III camera and probably whatever to come out after that. These systems are set up in the same way. You have one tab that is specifically to go through photo-based, maybe autofocus kinds of settings. You have the other one that is set for more movie-focused settings and audios and things like that. The other setting that you have is set for your networks or anything that you're doing when it comes to wireless connectivity, Bluetooth, maybe something dealing with the app. That's primarily where those things are going to be. Then you have the playback screen that if you're reviewing any kind of pictures or video, when you hit that play button on the back of your camera, those are the things that you would be going through to adjust for those. You don't have to do a lot on this one, so we really don't need to go through much. Then the next one is the setup menu. And so these are going to get into more deeper settings of the actual camera, maybe setting up your custom function buttons and going through your volume settings and some other things that are a little bit more technical, but doesn't always focus on the video. But you will find some video settings or things that impact your video or live streaming setup here. And then finally, we have the My Menu settings. And these sub tabs will be as many as you need them to be on this one, because this is something that's specific to you. I will be going through this in the video to show you the specifics of what I personally prefer to use when it comes to me setting up my camera for video. So that I don't need to go through every last tab or every last sub tab when I'm searching for something. I just want to know if I want to go from regular videos to slow motion, how do I do that? If I want to change the audio levels, can I set a button to that and just have it automatically, set there all the time? If I want to make some adjustments for a tutorial style video like today, and I need to change things a little bit versus my regular production work and change that setting back real quick, those are the kinds of things I like to put in the My Menu. So let's go ahead and get into the menu tab number 1. So I'm not going to describe what every little thing is. You can hit on the buttons at the bottom. It'll give you a short description if you want to. But my camera is set to movie because we're going through the video focus settings. So some of these that are grayed out, you won't necessarily see the ability to change it. And if you do want to change it, it'll tell you like, oh, you need to change this other thing before you can get over to the to change this one. And so for me, I have the file format. This is currently set at JPEG. If I am taking a picture, maybe you're sending that off to have somebody color grade that picture for you or something like that, or thumbnails. I actually have my photo settings set to JPEG plus RAW. You can't change that right now, but these are what I have currently. JPEG image style, I have it set to the large, so 20 megapixels, I believe that's what that is for. They have some other ones here, but I just go ahead and use the largest one. And then if I want to crop in, then I can do that without losing a whole bunch of details. Aspect ratio is 6:9. So if you're deciding that you want to take pictures for thumbnails and maybe you have a few shirts lined up, things like that day, and you're just, doing poses, changing your shirts, I like to use 16:9 because that's what I'm going to use for YouTube. If I want to crop in, then I can do that. Other than that, I don't change these other things and they're grayed out anyway. So let's go over to the next tab. Long exposure, noise reduction, I have this turned to off because I don't want it trying to fix anything. And it's like you can have it and give you the description when you hit that trash can button, but I don't want to do that. And so I'm just going to go back. High ISO noise reduction, I have that set to normal. The color space, this is actually really important. You don't want to be in this Adobe RGB. Especially if you're just getting started, just stick with the S RGB, or that standard RGB. Lens comp, I'm just going to leave everything pretty much set to auto. I'm not trying to adjust for anything specific to the lens. Let's go over to the next tab, tab 3. Okay, most of these settings that are grayed out, there's nothing for me to adjust for here. Bracket settings are most of this stuff is pretty much going to stay how it is set inside the box. Interval shoot function. This is if you're getting into time lapse. Again, that's more of a photo kind of a thing. We'll get into that in a different video, so we're not going to touch that right now. Tab 4. Now, this is something that is of huge help, especially once you want to get to the point that you can do what I teach my clients, which is the record to edit process. You're recording in such a way that by the time you get ready to take it into editing, you're not having to do a lot. So this menu actually is super helpful. So in a future video, I'll actually walk through this specifically on how you can set up your settings and lock in every single thing that you have. So that's how I get a consistent look for my live stream. I don't need to refigure out what my settings were. I'm able to set the memory in the camera to remember everything from the white balance, the shutter speed, the ISO, like all of it, how bright or dark it should be, how much blurry background I want, depending on the lens. All of that is set in the camera. So when it's time for me to live stream, whereas if I just came from vlogging, all I have to go is go pick that memory setting, and this one will stay there for me. And then you can register your custom shoot settings if you need to. But again, we'll cover that in a different video. Okay, let's go over to menu tab number 5. This one covers the autofocus number 1. I do make some changes for this a little bit. I do have it set to continuous autofocus. If I'm specifically needing to adjust something, you can go into manual focus, but I try not to do that. I do have some other hard custom function buttons set up for that. Again, we'll cover that a little bit later, but for now, that's in continuous autofocus. The priority set in AFS and AFC, or autofocus continuous, or autofocus single shot or something like that. I just have it on balanced emphasis, and I just leave that set there. The focus area is set to wide. You can play around with this a little bit. I tend not to, simply because for video, wide is going to basically cover this whole box or this whole area. And if I put something up, then it'll focus on that, or whatever the case. And all of these can be specific. So let's say it's a bunch of cars, a bunch of faces. You're in like a New York at its heyday kind of a setting, or kind of a, outdoor setting. And you only really wanted to focus on this specific area of your face, because that's about the motion and the range that you would move. Then you can set it to something like zone. So it's like only focus right here. Don't worry about anything that comes and goes outside of this right here. So that can be helpful for that. And like you have some of these other ones. Again, I tend not to mess with these because for most of the videos that I'm doing, probably about 9.78 out of 10, I have it set to wide. And so that's what I have that set on. Focus area limit, I leave these set to all of them because at any given time I may want to change something. I don't want to have to go through the menu to figure out where something is. So I just leave that alone. Switch VHAF area, I just have this set to autofocus point and autofocus area. Again, not diving deep into what these mean specifically, but that's what I have that set at. Tag number 6, most of these are pretty much will stay exactly as you see on the screen, and this should be pretty much how you have your stuff set out of the box. You shouldn't need to change any of these things. But when it comes to the face and the eye autofocus, then I do like to have mine set on the human, because in these new Sony cameras, the a6400, 6600, and so on, you have where you can have human detection autofocus, or you can have it set to animal eye autofocus. And I prefer to have it actually set to human because I'm a human, so I have it set there. So the right left eye select is based on the photo settings. In the Sony a6600, you will get the eye autofocus in video. That's not a feature the a6400 has. but that is available in photo mode. So I let it pick auto, so whichever eye is closer is the one that works. Face detection frame display, I do have that set to on, so I know when the autofocus box is being picked up. Animal eye display, so when you're switching over to animal autofocus, it'll pick up the eye of the animal and show you it on the box. When it comes to photos, again, and we'll do another video potentially for the a6400 in settings, but for the photo side, you do want that enabled. So when you do your thumbnails, you do have that option where it just snaps to your face or snaps to your eye to make sure everything that you want is in focus. Autofocus with shutter, I do have this turned to on because if I'm getting ready to record or something like that, or, you know, whatever the case is, I do want to go ahead and make sure that focus snaps to exactly where I'm pointing to. And that's easy to do as you're pressing the button. So it's like a half press and then you fully press it all the way down to go ahead and snap the picture or start the video. So that is on, and pre-autofocus is on as well. So tab 7 of this autofocusing menu, the AF3, I'm not going to do a whole lot here. The AF area auto clear is set to off. Display continuous autofocus area is set to on. Circulate or circular of whatever a focus point that's set to does not circulate. So just pretty much leave this standard. Now we're over in the exposure tab, sub tab number 8 here, and exposure compensation, I don't really adjust for those or anything like that. And plus this is grayed out right now. If you hit it, it's like, oh, you're in auto ISO at the moment or whatever the case is. So there's nothing for us to do or change. We do want to make a few other changes when it comes to the ISO setting. This will allow you to adjust the range. I want this to be as high as I want it to be. I don't want it to, you know, be limited because I never know what situation I'm going to be in. So I want it to be as high or as low as it can go. So 102,400 is the max. So I'm gonna leave it at the max. The metering mode I have set to multi. Phase priority in multimeter is on. Spot center or spot metering point, I have that set to center. Now this next one is exposure step. I do make an adjustment here so that as I'm adjusting like the ISO, which deals with how bright or dark something is, I do want to be able to make smaller increments so it's not huge jumps in like super dark to, you know, normal brightness to super bright. I'm able to get incremental and small changes. So I do have that exposure value set to 0.3. Exposure tab number 2 or sub tab number 9. I just have this set to auto. There's nothing that I'm changing in here with this stuff. So I just leave this alone. The flash is not anything that I've ever used when it comes to doing video. Usually I have a light, even a small one with me. However, the exposure compensation set, I do have that set to ambient and flash. So tab number 11, let's go over to the color, the white balance, and the imaging processing tab here. Now I do make some changes here because this does affect the color. It affects your skin tones. It affects whether your walls actually look white or if they look yellow. When they shouldn't. So, or if they look yellow when they should look white and they shouldn't, you know, and vice versa, or what have you. So now currently in this camera, it is set to custom. There's going to be another video where we'll walk you through how to get accurate colors, especially if you're just shooting standard, or even if you're exploring color grading a little bit, you still want to set your custom white balance. Again, get into that in a later video. So mine is set to custom. If you don't have what you need to set the custom white balance, which would be a gray card or something like that, then I would leave this in auto for now. There are some other options that you have available, but for me personally, auto white balance is fine, I guess, but I try not to be there. So I have mine set at custom 3 because I have a custom setting for the white balance to make sure the table is not looking yellow. It's actually white like it should look in real life. Priority set in AWB or auto white balance. I tend to go with an ambience type of look. Now, if you just look at the actual picture that's coming out of the camera, it makes some slight or incremental changes when it comes to that. But when it comes to skin tones for real, it does make a difference. And I just prefer ambience. It's not a right or wrong here. I just prefer ambience, being somebody with being a person of color. I have bronze skin. I don't want to really, it's certain things that I found, I'll just put it this way, in doing videos, I prefer ambient priority, even in the Canons and stuff like that, give a slightly warmer look versus it being super white and stuff like that. Again, more in the video about white balance. Dynamic range optimizer, you can have this set to auto. You can have it set to level 1, and it kind of helps with the dynamic range or how dark and bright things are. You can kind of leave this set to auto, or you can leave it specifically set to a certain level. I mean, it's really a preference at this point. You can look more into this if you want. I tend not to use it for real, but it's kind of set to auto, so I'll leave it. Now here's a setting that not a lot of people are familiar with. You've seen, maybe if you're coming from a Canon camera, then you have like the standard, the portrait, the faithful picture profiles, because they don't have log footage that allows you to go from a flatter image to a more stylistic look or a color graded image. But with the creative style, you have standard, you have vivid, you have neutral, you have clear, you have deep, and on and on and on. That gives you different kinds of looks. And so if you're not familiar with color grading, you're going into different looks. These are kind of fun or interesting to play around with. I tend to leave mine at standard if I'm doing like a live stream, for example. So if you've enjoyed the way that live streams look, I haven't started introducing Let's Live, for color grading with that yet, but I have mine pretty much set to standard, and I make small adjustments from there. But that is what you can have yours set at if you're new. The picture effect is another area where it's like not really talked about because more people use this more professionally, but sometimes it's fun to play with these. You have the toy effect or the pop effect, and so on and so on. And all of these kind of like stylistic kind of choices and things like that you can use and play around with. So I don't tend to mess with these too much unless I'm playing around with a type of video, perhaps, but it's there if you want it. Now, the picture profile is something that goes into actual color grading and things like that. And so again, you can start to play around with this. They give you a lot of spaces because they do give you a lot of log profiles if you want to start experimenting with color grading. And so you can literally go through all of these if you prefer. I do color grade my videos a little bit, not doing anything specific with it, but if I'm using standard in that creative style, like for the live streams, then I have this picture profile set to off. When I get ready to actually start color grading, then I'll go and pick a log profile and go through all those different things for that. But otherwise, if you're just getting started, I would leave this set to off. Submenu tab number 12, I have the soft skin effect off. Again, if you're using photos, you may prefer this or like this. I tend not to. And then shutter auto white balance lock, I have that set to off, and that's more photo-based stuff. So number 13 is a little interesting. If you've ever had a lens that manually focuses, or you need to turn off the autofocus and manually focus, like if you're too close to something, then you can adjust for the focus magnifier that will allow you to really punch in and adjust so that you can spin the lens for yourself and really start to focus and things like that on a specific area. I don't want to do that right now, but at the same time, I do want to make some adjustments slightly to customize this menu. So I do want to use the focus magnification timer. I set that to no time limit because I don't want to be trying to dial in manual focus on something. And maybe I'm looking at my phone or text comes through or something, or reviewing notes, and then that magnifying box goes away. When I'm done with it, then I'll put it away. So I just have mine set to no limit. Initial focus magnification, that tells you how much you can punch in or out. So I don't like to zoom all the way in at this, 5.9 magnification. 1 times magnification is enough. Autofocus and focus magnification, you can have that set to on. Manual focus assist, I have mine currently set to off. Last one on this menu here is the peaking setting. Peaking helps you when it comes to trying to manually focus on something. So I do have this set to on. The color will vary in specific for the environment that you're in. So if you're outdoors and you're trying to focus manually on a leaf, and obviously leaves are green most of the time, then I don't want to pick something that is not going to be easy to identify. And so I have mine set to high when it comes to the strength of it, because the more dots I see, the more in focus I know that thing is. The less I see, the more out of focus it is. So I change this periodically depending on the environment or what I'm shooting in. And the last time was set to yellow because that was easy to identify comparative to like a red or blue or even a white. Something else interesting that the Sony cameras have is the ability to register your face so that when it sees your face, it knows to prioritize focusing on that versus somebody else's face. So you can take a few photos of yourself and register your face. I tend to do a few expressions, which would be the first one, which would be just a blank and a straight face. The next one would be a smile with no teeth. The other one, a smile with teeth, and then maybe you can do some more like with or without glasses, depending on what you prefer. But those three usually gets the job done. All right, so we're halfway there because it's not a whole lot more surprisingly to get through, but this one will dive a little bit deeper because we're covering the video settings. So in movie one, this is something that I do find important. I prefer to be in manual exposure because these different ones, program auto, aperture priority, all of these do something slightly different. But I prefer to actually set the ISO, set the aperture and all those different things myself. I don't want the camera making decisions for me. If you're completely new, maybe all that stuff is kind of foreign to you, then you can set yours to program auto and the camera will decide what it thinks is best when it comes to how bright or dark something should be and all the other settings in between. Again, for me personally, I prefer to start teaching in manual because it's not something that's hard to learn. It just takes something that gets a little bit of time to get used to. So the next thing is going to be the file format, and this is going to be specific to like, do you want to record in 4K or HD, or it has the ABC HD mode. I don't tend to use that at all. I prefer to use 4K or HD. And so if I'm using 4K, the screen kind of goes a little dark there, but at the same time, I can't do that while I'm connected up right now because this particular setup doesn't allow for me to stream in 4K, so I'm going to leave that set to HD. The next setting is going to be dealing with the frame rate, or what's called in here is the record setting. So whether it's in 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 120 frames per second, or what have you, this is a preference depending on what you prefer to record in. You can do 24, you can do 30 or 60 for most standard and regular videos. And then you can do 60 or 120 frames per second if you're preferring to do something more slow motion. Most of the time, I'm either going to record in 24 or 30 frames per second. And it'll tell you like multiple options about that because you can do with more data. And so you have one at 16, one at 15, or not 15, but 50. And so 24 gives you about 50. So I'm fine with that if that's what I'm using. And then I always pick accordingly if I want to change something. But most of the time it's just 24 frames per second for me. S&Q settings, this is like the slow and quick settings. So we covered just a smidge about the setting that you saw that gives you the ability to deal with time lapses and things like that. I like actually using this. It is a little bit of a lower quality than if you actually went into the camera, specifically set it up for time lapse and all that. I'm not that particular when it comes to my time lapses, so I do like the S&Q setting. So depending on if you're wanting everything to look fast or really slow and blurry, then you can adjust accordingly for this. Again, a dedicated video will be more based around time lapses, but this is that setting or that area if you wanted to kind of play around with that. By far, this is one of the best, most underrated features of one of these Sony cameras, and that is proxy recording. Proxy recording basically records something like a 720p, which is a super base HD file that's really small actually. So if I'm recording 4K, X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah kind of stuff, then I can also create a second file that records at the same time that is a proxy file. So when you're going over into your editing software, like Adobe Premiere Pro, you can say, hey, these 4K files are really big. It's very easy to get up to, 20 and 30 megabyte, or not megabytes, but gigabyte files. Don't use that one. Take this 720p file that maybe is 7 gigabytes and let me edit from that one. Then your editing software will say, good, this is easy for me to process. It's easy for me to use. And as a matter of fact, when you're ready to publish this video or export it, I'll swap out this small, kind of looks a little mushy file, and I'll swap that out and let you actually export the good footage to 4K, and you're not having to, overwork your computer. So proxy recording is super duper helpful. Unfortunately, Final Cut Pro 10 wants to create their own proxy. So unfortunately, it's not something I get to use too often, but this is a phenomenal feature if you're using a software like Adobe Premiere Pro that will let you import proxy files. So amazing, amazing stuff. If you want to know more about that, I'll link a video that a creator I really enjoyed named Javier Mercedes did about how to actually use that in Adobe. So not a lot to change here with this one, but the autofocus drive speed does impact how fast or slow the camera autofocuses. I prefer to make it just pretty normal for the most part, because these Sony cameras already focus extremely fast. And so I have my current autofocus drive speed set to normal, the autofocus tracking sensitivity set to standard, autofocus slow shutter is on, initial focus magnification, again, is set to 1 versus that 5.9 or what have you. Now, this is important because the audio recording settings let you adjust for your audio levels or not. So we do want to have that set to on. And then we want to make sure the audio recording levels, depending on whatever it is, there's no microphone mounted on this one. And so you're able to see that the actual levels are set really high. Most of the time, if you're using like a lapel microphone or a wireless system with your camera, or most of the time just like a good lapel microphone, this honestly can be set anywhere from 2 to maybe 6 or 7. And that is about as high as you ever have to go. With a direct lapel microphone or something like that hooked in, really you're at about 2 or 3 most of the time. And then if you are doing like a vlog or something like that, then maybe you're getting a little bit higher at like 10, depending on the environment and the type of microphone that you're using. But most of the time, you really don't have to go extremely high with these at all. So one of my favorite features on the Sony being the fact that we can see the audio levels on the camera. The audio level display is going to be set to on, so we can see that. Now, this is going to impact your audio, and it is important to turn this off, and that's the wind noise reduction, because with it on, it just sounds really, really weird. I'd rather use a wind muff or cover the microphone or something than to let it digitally process that audio. It's just going to sound like trash. So that is set to off. Marker display set to off, so I'm not even going to adjust the settings. And movie with the shutter is set to on, because this allows me to press this shutter button on the front and actually be able to start recording videos. And so even though there is a dedicated record button on like the corner of the camera, it's just easier, and with that way your hand is naturally on your camera, just to, tap it in the front and go ahead and start recording. So turn that on. Some of these other settings starts to deal with the stabilization, maybe in the lens or on the camera if you're using something like the a6400. However, there's not a whole lot that we need to change here, so we're kind of going to run through this a little bit fast. The electronic front curtain, I do have mine set to on, so when you're taking pictures, you do see that. Release without the lens, when you're taking like thumbnails, I do have this enabled, so if I'm ever using a manual lens, it may not register it because it doesn't have electronics or something like that. Then I just have this enabled so the camera knows still work anyway. However, release without a card means like right now, I don't have a memory card in the camera, and I don't want the camera to actually start recording. I want it to send a message on the screen and say, hey, you don't have a memory card, so we're not going to even say that we're recording. I don't want to get confused. There's plenty of times where you think you're recording already, and you're not, even with the record level and the buttons and all the stuff that are supposed to help you to remember that. I don't want the camera to say like, oh, okay. No, I don't want it to release or take a picture without the card either. So that's what this is. It's disabled. Steady shot is set to on because this is using the kit lens right now. And the lens does have the optical steady shot, or that OSS, that lens stabilization. So as often as it has it, I want it turned on always. This is another brilliant feature when it comes to the Sony cameras, and that is the clear image zoom. So right now, the original zoom, that's not something that we have set in. And so like the difference between standard zoom versus clear image zoom allows me to not optically zoom in or anything else, or digitally zoom in, but specifically I can zoom in or crop into the photo. I don't lose any of my background blur. The image doesn't get fuzzy. It's a brilliant feature. Probably do more on this later, but I have mine set to clear image zoom only, and I just leave it set there. Okay, so hopefully you're sticking with me and everything's going okay. We're almost there. So the next one is going to be the display button. I do have mine set to the monitor where I only have a couple things selected. That means when I hit that display button on the back of the camera, I only want to see all the settings that I have everything set to. And then the leveler that lets me know is the camera, off tilted. Like when I first already started to do this video, it was slightly off. So I could just say, oh, let me adjust the camera a little bit to make sure that the camera is leveled. So if you're outside doing a video, maybe the tripod legs are uneven, but the camera shouldn't have to be uneven because this leveler helps you to say at least adjust the camera so I can at least see that. Everything else, I don't have any of these settings on because I just want to flop between the two, and I pretty much set my Canon M50 up the exact same way. And so I have display all info, that one is checked, and then level is checked. Other than that, I have everything else unchecked because it just cycling through all that stuff gets to be frustrating. When it comes to the finder, I do have the leveler set, I do have the histogram set, and I do have no display information. And the reason why I have this set up slightly differently is because if I'm outside and it's bright, I'm trying to take a thumbnail or at least see what I can see outside of the bright sunshine, I want to be able to see just the image only. The histogram helps me to also know if it's too far to the left. It's a lot of brightness and a lot of white things. It's just kind of like a lot of overexposure. And then the other side, it goes super dark. So I just want to give some kind of measure outside of my actual eyes that gives me some data to say what's happening on the actual image or the video. And then again, that leveler, just so I know if it's leveled or not. The finder frame here for a frame rate, I have this set to standard. Zebra settings is a kind of a preference a little bit. Some people are diehard users, but what that is it lets you see if we turn that on, if something is extremely bright or not. So there's no way for me to show you this while I have this kind of hooked up via HDMI, but I usually keep this set to off. But basically, if the zebras are on, you'll see a zebra looking image that has lines going through it that'll say, hey, anything with these lines on it is really too bright. I kind of just prefer to look at it and adjust for myself of what I'm trying to do. So I just kind of have this set to off, but I think it's important to at least learn what that does and how it impacts your image, because if you do need help, that's a great setting to know how to use. The grid line is the rule of thirds because we're doing video and just like photos and stuff like that. The rule of thirds, you have these lines that come on the screen. I do want to be able to at least know if I'm framing up a subject or something. Like right now I'm center framed. If I moved off slightly over here, now I'm in what they call the rule of thirds. But for me, I just want to have the grid on there so I at least know what's what. Exposure setting guide, I just have this set to on. Subtab 7 here for the display or auto review. There's a play button on the back of the camera. So if I want to actually look at a picture or the video I just finished, I don't want the camera constantly showing me, you want to look now? Do you want to look now? I'll actually go and look at it if I want to look at it. So I have my auto review set to off because I don't want the camera to constantly keep trying to show me what I just did. I already know what I did. If I want to look at it, I'll hit the play button and actually review it. So now we start to get into something a little interesting, which is the custom key and operations and things like that. I'm just going to show you really what mine are because you can set these according to maybe how you prefer to do things a little bit like that. The one thing I do want to point out to you is the icons dictate whether it's for photo, whether it's for video, or whether it is for playback. So the one that looks like the mountains with the picture on it, that's for your photo settings. So you can have custom key settings for pictures and you can have custom key settings for video. I do make slight changes for mine sometimes because if I'm taking pictures, there are things and settings that aren't video related. I don't want to share those same buttons for both. So I'll say if I'm doing photos, these are the buttons I need the most or the features I need to access quickly the most. If I'm doing videos, these are the features I need to access quickly the most. And then the playback options really is not a whole lot to that I'll change. So let's go into the photo based one. This will have the autofocus and manual focus toggle so that it shows me, I can flip this switch up or down, or I can toggle between manual focus and autofocus on my camera because the lenses don't always have a switch on them. And I can just easily say if I'm autofocusing or manual focusing. Auto exposure, can't remember what the L stands for. Hold, zoom, have this set here. Autofocus is set, drive mode, ISO for the third option, and exposure compensation for the fourth option. Tab number 3 here at the top, I have this, the auto record level, and this is because I'm mostly doing video just all the time, like 99.987% of the time. I really want to be able to access my audio levels and change that very quickly. So that's set at the top of the camera. If you have a lens that has a button on it that is like a G Master lens or something like that, you can set this to whatever you want. This is set currently at focus hold, but I don't have a lens that has that, so it kind of doesn't matter. Okay, now let's go down to the custom key settings for video. So similar to before, I have this set to autofocus and manual focus toggle. The next one I have, if I flip this switch down, I have it set to zoom, because if I want to use that clear image zoom, I don't want to have to dig for it. I just want to be able to crop in without losing any detail, background blur, or focus at all. And that is great for that. The next one is going to be this button at the bottom right of the camera that I have to focus magnification. So if I need to go into manual focus and I really want to zoom in a lot on the camera so I can make sure I'm really in focus, or the things that I want are in focus, then I want to magnify that very quickly. So I have that set there. When it comes to this rear 2 screen, everything is just saying, hey, whatever I have set for photos, have it set that same way. So that's why you see follow custom picture settings, because that's what it's referring to. And again, because it's the specifics for video focus, if I'm in video or audio or photos, it doesn't matter. I want to be able to adjust the audio. So I have that adjusting for the audio record levels on the sub tab menu 3 to control this top button on the front of the camera. And then 4 has it set to the same way, because again, if I'm doing photos, maybe I'm borrowing or renting a lens, then I'll just leave it the same way that I had it set on the other one. Custom key for the reviewing of images. I just pretty much have this to send to smartphone, because most of the time that's kind of what I want to do. If I've recently just taken a picture, whether I'll take a picture from my camera after I'm done doing a video, and maybe I want to hurry up and send that over to Instagram or something like that, then I just want to be able to send that to my smartphone. So that's that setting that I have set to there. And then the other one at the top just saying, hey, whatever it has for photo or video, just do the same thing there. Function menu settings, there is a lot that goes through this. I'll show you what I have. You can go through and pick and use accordingly, but these are the ones that I most commonly use when it comes to that quick menu on the camera. These are all the things that I use. I'll cover this more in depth in a different video. My dial settings, I don't change anything from that. And the dial or the wheel setup, you can just kind of change it here. It's only 1 or 2 options. So I have TV or the shutter value first, and then the aperture value for the other one. So that's pretty much it. It's the ones that are in the front, the back wheel dial, or the one, the button that's in the at the top usually up here, then you can adjust for that. And so I just have it set to this. Okay, custom operation and menu subtab number 9. So that aperture and shutter speed, I have it set to normal. The dial wheel exposure value, I have it set to wheel. The movie button, I have this set to always. And if we click on it, it says it enables the button in all shooting modes. And so I always want to be able to just press the movie button at any given time and have it start recording a video. So I'm not changing that for anything. The dial wheel lock, I have it set to unlock because, again, I always want to be able to change it. You can lock it if you don't want to accidentally change anything, but I have never found that to happen in the year plus that I've been using these cameras. Audio signals, again, I have this set to off. You don't want to have it make a bunch of noise, especially if you are getting ready to record videos. It'll make this doo-doo-doo kind of chime to let you know we started and then we stopped recording. I never want to do that because it gets to be a little bit distracting. And if I'm doing an interview and it stops recording for some reason, if the memory card gets full, for example, I never want to hear that noise. I'm always watching the screen anyway, so just, you can turn it on or off, it's up to you, but I'll leave mine off. These next two tabs for the network settings, as well as the one for you dealing with the playback options, there's not a whole lot that I'm actually going to go through with this one because this starts to get a little bit into you customizing it. I do have for my control with smartphone though, I have this set to on because as I'm doing with this video, even though the camera is fairly close, I just don't want to have to get up just to press the record button. So I want to record the actual or start recording with my phone. So I have that set to on. If I am always connected to it, it will tend to drain the battery a little bit faster. However, I do want to make sure that I'm always connected so I can just start the app. It's already connected to my camera and I'm good to go. Because a lot of times, honestly, I'm live streaming or I'm doing an interview and I want to capture footage of myself to use for my Instagram post and things like that, or just to share that in a different way. And I want to just start recording without getting up and all this extra other stuff. So I want to be able to control it with my phone. Airplane mode is set to off, but this is something that's helpful if you are traveling or when you start to travel back up again, because this is being recorded during the coronavirus pandemic. And so that is helpful when you go into airplane mode or you want to save on your battery, you can turn this on. Wi-Fi settings we're covering in a different video because it will be specific to you connecting up the Wi-Fi to use the apps and the things like that with your camera. Same goes for network setting number 2. We're not going to cover anything here because this is specific to you setting up the stuff with the Wi-Fi networks and Bluetooth and whatnot on your phone or your device with your camera. So the actual same standard settings that are there when you first start up your camera for the playback options, these 3 menus, I don't change anything with these. I just leave them set as they are. So let's go over to the setup menu one. Now we can start to get into a few other things that you may want to change on your camera, but for the most part, it's not a whole lot of things that we need to change here. So when we go down to gamma display assist, if you're recording in a log profile and you want to see colors and stuff like that, you can turn that on. I have mine set to off because it's in standard at the time. Volume settings allow you to adjust the audio levels on your actual camera. I just kind of have this set to 6 right now. And tile menu, I have set to off because I don't want to change the way this menu looks. It's easy for me to know within these 5 icons where the photos or video settings. Am I going to the network area or, setup screens, whatever? I would rather leave it like this than to change it to some whole other menu that I don't know what it looks like or how or where things are. And probably it's more difficult. Setup menu number 2 here, I have the mode dial guide set to off. I have delete confirmation to cancel first. So it gives me some kind of options when I'm going through that. Display quality, I have set to standard. Powersave start time, I have set to 30 minutes, which is as high as it can go. And you can adjust that depending on what you prefer. I don't want my camera to go into sleep a lot. But if it is sitting for a long time, then it's like, okay, if I've been gone for 30 minutes, go ahead and go to sleep. Auto power off. Temperature, this is so that if the camera is noticing that it's starting to get warm after high usage, especially if you're doing videos a lot, the camera really isn't overheating, but I set this to high so you don't get freaked out if you see it's just like, oh my gosh, you've been running for a long time. It's like, calm down. I know what I'm doing. So I set that to high. NTSC versus PAL. If you're in the United States, then you do want to have this already set to NTSC. Most of the time, the cameras, if you're buying it from someplace that sells locally or ships to you locally, you're not buying it from, like I didn't buy this camera from China, for example, then it's not going to have to be anything that we need to change here. However, if I do travel to another country, and this deals with like the frequency, or if you see the lights flutter and all kind of crazy stuff, then that'll automatically be set to PAL. Now, this does make a difference with your frame rate if you are in another nation where they do use a different type of setting, because you won't see, for example, 24 frames per second on your cameras. You'll see 25 frames per second. You won't see 120 frames per second for that super slow motion. You will see 100 frames per second. So if you ever notice those kinds of things, you are probably in a PAL-based environment versus NTSC like we are here in America. But if you're in the US, then you're going to use NTSC, but your camera should already be there. So just don't touch it unless you know you're going to a whole other country. Cleaning mode, I have mine where it's like every so often, if I'm doing something, I do let the camera go through a cleaning mode. But for the most part, it's nothing to really be bothered with. touch operation, I do have this set to on because at least on these cameras, the A6400, 66, you can tap the screen and actually have it focus on your face or whatever. So that's nice. I wish the whole camera screen was touch operated, but it's not. But I guess we got to get one of the newer ones if we want to do that. Touch panel and pad, I have it set to touch panel and pad. Touchpad settings, there's nothing that I change in here. So it's reflective as to what you see on the screen. And then the TC UV settings, I'm not changing anything here. So let's go over to the next option. So if you have a remote or something like that, then you can adjust for these. I don't, so I'm not touching anything. I'm leaving that set to off. The HDMI settings is important if you are preparing to live stream. So let's go into that. So HDMI resolution, you can choose if you want it to be 21 by 60p or 1080p, or you can choose 1080p. It doesn't matter. And then you have the options between 60 and 24 frames per second. I have mine currently set to 60, but it's just a preference of what you prefer to use, depending on what your stuff is set at. Or if you're going to do 24, then you can change that, and it's up to you when you're doing your camera stuff. So this is specific for if I'm doing a video like this, or if you are live streaming. If I'm live streaming, this HDMI information that you're seeing on the screen, you do not want this. This is like the issue that most of the Canons have, where you can't get clean HDMI out, which is just show me the video, not all the settings on the screen. And so because I'm doing this tutorial video and I'm using a similar live streaming setup, it is set to on. However, if I'm not doing these kind of videos, it's set to off because I just want you to be able to see the camera feed, not the information around it. So set yours to off to make sure that you don't see the icons on the screen. Control for HDMI is set to on, but there's nothing else here for us to change, and TC output is set to off. The only other thing on this menu that we really want to change, the USB LUN setting, we have that set to multi, which should be about standard with how your camera came. And then the USB power supply is if you want to be able to charge your camera via USB, you do need this set to on. So I always leave mine set to on. Nothing you really need to do here on the setup 5, because chances are when you were setting your camera up outside, when you first, were setting it up from inside the box, you probably set your language, you set your date and time and your region and stuff like that. Other than that, you don't need to change these specific things. And I definitely don't want to change the language because I wouldn't be able to find anything. File number, I have this set to series, set file name. So if I'm doing like photos or something, I have it set for DRG. You can pick whatever initials or names or whatever that you want. So you can customize that a little bit there. And folder name is set to standard form. Nothing that we need to change here on setup number 7. So let's go over to the My Menu setting. So without specifically going into details in this specific video, we'll do one that's dedicated more into this, but I do want to cover it a little bit here. But I just want to show you what I currently have mine set up. And as I find something that I'm using more and more that I need access to, whether for the tutorial videos like this or for my regular content creation, then I'll add something so I can quickly access it within just these 1 or 2 menu options versus having to go through literally everything that we just covered in this video potentially to figure out if you can't remember where it is. Then, this is super, super helpful for that. So I have my record settings here and the file format so I can quickly switch between 1080p and 4K and the frame rate that I want to use. Silent shutter is something that I use quite often if I'm doing video photos, then because I don't want it to make that click, click, click sound, the traditional photo sound. So it has the silent shutter feature in here with the full range of access to the camera. So that's currently set to off because you can't access it right now, nor is the zoom, but that one is also one that I have here as a quick menu. So again, no matter where I'm doing photos or videos, I can access these things. S&Q settings, so if I want to do a time lapse, I can quickly come in here and adjust those settings and then start the time lapse there afterwards. Control with the smartphone is something I frequently use because I'm doing live streams where I'm not only live streaming, but I'm also recording a video at the same time. So I want to most of the time record on the actual camera, and I'm going to be controlling that with my phone. My second My Menu has the USB connection. This is currently set to mass storage as I have this connected up, and the control with smartphone is on. But when I'm not doing any kind of tutorial videos like this, this actually needs to be to PC remote. If you're actually going to use like Ecamm Live and you want to use the USB option, like you don't have an Elgato Cam Link, You need to set the PC remote and not mass storage, because mass storage is kind of like, do you want to read the images off the camera, off the memory card into your computer, or do you want to be able to live stream in like a PC remote? We want PC remote if we're using USB. So this is only temporarily changed, but this is not what it is ever set at. The white balance, again, is something I frequent a lot. So I have this set here as a custom button that I can come to, as well as the priority and auto white balance, because not every scenario or situation does ambience look good. So I may want to change that back to the standard or the white setting, and then the HDMI settings, which we just previously covered. I had some things that was like on a My Menu 3 that I eventually deleted, so I don't even have a My Menu 3, but it just does jump to 4. So there's no point in me trying to add it to 3 just so it numerically makes sense, because I'm never looking at that. So the My Menu 4, which technically is the third menu, I have zebra settings because, again, sometimes it's helpful. Proxy recording, because sometimes it's helpful. Peaking, register the custom settings. So if I'm ever in a new environment, for example, if you're recording at home, I like to have one for my live streaming, one for my regular videos. If I'm going to do a shoot, once I'm in that client's environment, I'm setting up custom settings for them, for maybe camera 1, camera 2, and things like that. So I don't have to come back the next day and figure out what's the best settings in this environment. I always know, and especially if you're traveling or vlogging or something, you only have to set the white balance in those settings. Like if you're in a room and you're doing some vlogging and things like that, you set it once, you forget about it, you don't have to think about it again. So those two options underneath, the memory recall to go back to those settings, or the memory to set it or what have you, then those are what those are for. Fifth My Menu setting that I have set up is to send to my smartphone function, airplane mode if I'm traveling, the 4K output select, and then format if I need to format my memory card, which I do every single time before I start recording a video. Now, the last one is the actual My Menu setting, which if you're setting yours up for the first time, then you'll be able to add an item, sort the items, and like rearrange them in a way that maybe makes sense. So that's helpful just to kind of put all the video stuff together versus whatever if you find stuff. Because again, this is a pretty vast menu system because it's like a little computer. So if you're like, oh, I want to kind of reorganize things, then it is helpful to kind of sort and move stuff around. If you want to delete an item or to delete a page, like I deleted my page 3 because I didn't need it, or delete everything and start from scratch, which I'm not going to do. And so that's how you actually, would go through and set it up. So in the next video, I'm going to be walking you through how to adjust the white balance on your actual camera so you can get a custom white balance. So again, the things that are white shouldn't look yellow, and the things that are yellow shouldn't look green and get weird color shifts and things like that. Because if you're getting ready to record videos next with your camera, you don't want to do that with the colors all wonky, because it's a little bit difficult to fix, especially if you're new. So I'm going to put that video on the screen and we'll be diving right into it right up now.